What up friends, I'm James, your host, and today I'm going to be reviewing the new Tyler the Creator album, Igor. Tyler the Creator is back after receiving widespread acclaim for his 2017 project Flower Boy, and it's a record that saw him soaring to new heights, new sounds, and a greater sense of intimacy, and identity even as well. Igor largely continues this trend, but it tends to find itself structured more like a continuous experience rather than on a track-by-track basis. While this can lead to some pretty amazing sounds and experimental storytelling, there are points in which Igor is not as seamless as it could be, honestly, and it's not as immediately as memorable as well. Igor's theme is definitely a fantastic opening track, from the heavy synths that just drown you in the sound to this lo-fi inspired beat, and even vocal performances by Tyler and Lil Uzi Vert. These hypnotic vocals are not exactly well delivered, but they mesh incredibly well with this fuzzy instrumentation, and they have a bit of raw charm to them in that lo-fi sense too. The lyrics serve as an introduction to our character, guiding us on his journey of awareness and intimacy with his own psyche as well as with his lover. EARFQUAKE was the lead single and by far is one of the best tracks on this album. The beautiful keys and delicate vocals really bring us back to the Flower Boy sound, but the added emphasis on electronics, they kind of bring the song into a class all their own. Tyler isn't the best singer, but on this track, his emotions really do carry through his voice, and this one in particular, they just kind of strengthen his lyrics more in how he delivers it. The synths that travel all over the chorus are especially engaging, and combined with his delivery and lyrics, it makes for a pretty heartfelt experience. Playboi Carti's silly little baby voice adds a sense of almost innocence to what is essentially a love anthem, and the second verse that's done in Tyler's more traditional rapping style, it adds a great sense of space and it transitions well into the other parts of the song. The lyrics are a bit heartbreaking and uplifting at the same time, with Tyler pining for his old lover while also reminiscing on the good times he's had as well. I think it is a bit more of a rap-driven track, and because of this, we can see that his rapping is better than his singing. This is a theme that's kind of prevalent on a lot of the songs, where when we get to his rapping and the singing in the same song, one clearly outshines the other, but I would say that this is another great track overall. The warm and crackling beat, combined with the cool and funky synths, it's a pretty well put together sense of atmosphere, combining two very unlike sounds, but they end up working pretty well. His nonchalant rapping on how in love he is a pretty humorous touch, but also paints his emotions in a very real and honest light. We're not always shouting things from the rooftops, a lot of time we're pretty nondescript about what we feel. Solange's lighter vocals on the chorus are also a pretty nice contrast to Tyler's very deep rap, and the smooth and bouncy bass and synths on the bridge are another highlight. Both of these elements give a sense of space to what is otherwise a very sensory song, and a lot of things are happening at once, but there are moments where space is brought up to the table that kind of gives us a moment to reflect on it. The middle of the album, however, kind of falters a bit, and Running Out of Time is the most obvious mention of this. It's probably my least favorite track on the album. There's less smooth transitions here, along both in the song and from one song to the next, and there's also less impressive vocal and instrumental performances as well. Tyler's vocals can honestly come off a bit annoying in some parts of this song. The fairly simple and bass-driven instrumental was not nearly as impressive as the song before it, unfortunately. It seems like there are just too many ideas going on at once in this song, and very few of the parts actually transition well into each other anyway. However, I will say that lyrically it's pretty good, and I like how the lyrics impact the dynamic of Tyler's relationship. New Magic Wand also doesn't really do much for me. It's also the most clear example of Tyler's singing being not that great when he gets out of his comfort zone. The instrumental, however, is very pulsating and heavy and is definitely more engaging than the previous one. Santigold provides some nice background vocals, but Tyler's singing voice just prevents this song from reaching the heights it could have reached. It also almost turns into a completely different song during the last third or so of the track, and it's a bit too, the transition is a bit too sudden for my liking. There are some good wordplay in the lyrics though, and it's a bit more intense like some of Tyler's older work, albeit in a little less overtly edgy way. Now, A Boy Is a Gun brings us back into the high quality shit, and this is definitely my favorite track on the album. There's some great samples with the gun sound effects, as well as the sampled vocals here. And the vocal samples in particular remind me almost of something like the Avalanches, and I was kind of wondering whether the Avalanches were a bit of an inspiration for this project, because this also comes up every so often in other songs too. Tyler is also on top of his game in the rapping department here, and there's these smooth and emotional flows paired with these ethereal synths. There's also some pretty fantastic bass and keys that pair with the synths pretty well. The comparison he makes between his lover and the gun and how they're both dangerous to him is pretty fantastic, honestly. And it also highlights the sadness and confusion that Tyler's facing because his relationship isn't working out. And the twinkling synth during the last third of the song is a pretty incredible effect when complemented by the keys and even an electric guitar too. Puppet is another rap-centered track and another case of Tyler being comfortable yet also adding a bit of an experimental touch. The main synth and beat is pretty hypnotic, and the acoustic guitar along with the lo-fi, almost marching band-esque beat, it just adds to the sensitivity and intimacy of the song. Tyler and Kanye's harmonies on the chorus are also surprisingly sweet and delicate, which is unlike what they normally do in certain respects. And it also shows that Tyler is capable at singing as long as he doesn't go too high and has a proper instrumental behind him. Even though he isn't as dynamic as many other singers out there, as long as he has a good instrumental, he can be very unique. Kanye's verse is also pretty heartfelt, and it adds to the intimate sense of progression and pace of the song, and the lyrics really reflect on the pros and cons of being protective in love, how much is overprotective, what's not protective enough. It's an interesting insight. What's Good is definitely the most intense and fast-paced song on the album, and though it's a bit of a tone shift, the darker synths and blown-out beat are balanced with some of the more serene moments on the record too. Especially during the bridge, all these elements help tie this more intense sound to the overall narrative and to the overall instrumental of the actual album as a whole. Tyler's flows here are very punchy and impressive and are a bit of a throwback to some of his older works, I feel, and it's a good combination of old and new in that regard. The lyrics are pretty funny and witty on this track too, like with the Dracula, 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 suck me first and I might get back at ya. It's nice to see that Tyler also incorporates a sense of humor still, even in more subtle ways. Lyrically, it also kind of helps show that Tyler, or our Igor character here, is now confident in his sexuality and in his identity as well. He's not really trying to prove anything to anybody at this point, he's just being who he is, and I think it shows in how kind of energetic and how excited he is when he's performing a lot of these songs, and by how dynamic a lot of the soundscapes are on them too. Gone Gone / Thank You is reminiscent to the same sort of structure that we had on Flower Boy, where it's kind of two parts to one whole of a song. There's a very light acoustic guitar element to lead us into the song as a whole, and the combination of sounds along with CeeLo Green and Tyler's vocals are also, weirdly enough, fairly similar to the Avalanches, like I mentioned on previous songs. And it's also interesting in how upbeat the instrumental is, but also how downcast and melancholy the lyrics can be. The contrast between the singing and Tyler's rapping at the end of the Gone Gone portion of the song it's another highlight as the song takes a more contemplative turn. It also provides a pretty nice transition into the thank you portion of the song. Tyler is growing as a person, and he's acknowledging the good and bad aspects of his relationship. He's accepted that his love is gone, but isn't living in hatred or despair. Rather, he's using this experience to propel himself forward, and the chilling synths at the end of the thank you portion really accentuate his way of maturing as well. It shows that he understands what happened, and he understands that sometimes he needs to move on. Are We Still Friends is the last song on the album, and the smooth, soulful outro that this song serves as is a pretty nice way to end the project overall. With this song, we're kind of reflecting on the sounds and the lyrics and the vocals that we've heard previously. His style of singing on the track fits this sort of synth organ sound, and it adds a bit of a fluttery and jazzy tone to the instrumental. Not that it needed it, but it kind of just makes it more soulful. The intricate and subtle electric guitar gives the track a bit of an edge too, and it might be indicative of how, though the relationship is over, Tyler is still willing to give his excitement to his former lover and still wants to relate to him, although he might want to do it as a friend now rather than a partner. Pharrell's lighter vocals, along with Tyler's more intense vocals while they sing together, it's a nice contrast that actually mimics the contrast of this harder electric guitar with the more delicate synths and the instrumental itself. It kind of parallels that in a way. And the burst of energy in Tyler's scream at the end is a pretty good send-off, and it really captures his core personality, that even though he's very contemplative on this album, and he's been contemplative for a little while now, he's still got that classic Tyler persona in him to some degree. Now, Tyler's new sound has plenty of hits, but it also has a few misses as well. When he strays out of his comfort zone, like with his singing, it can appear a bit grating and messy here and there, and it's obvious that his rapping is better than his singing whenever we have a track that contains both. Though most of the instrumentals are pretty beautiful, a lot of them don't have a lot of staying power on them, and the album doesn't really flow well enough to capitalize on their cohesiveness. It's not really a song where you can listen to individual tracks, save for some, but it's also not cohesive enough where they string together flawlessly. Adding the random interview and audio clips at the end of certain songs kills the flow a bit for me, and I feel like it would have been better suited to have them placed during the songs over an instrumental rather than have them break up the pace at the end. However, Tyler's lyrics are really heartfelt and well put together, and I like how he doesn't draw too much attention to his features, too. Instead, everyone is used to accentuate the main and core sound along with the core message of the album, rather than them just kind of doing their own thing and appearing on a song just to say that Tyler got so-and-so on their song. It really feels like they were trying to make an experience rather than say, hey, look, we got this guy on this track. So I think that was pretty cool. Overall, I'm feeling a light 8 on Igor. I thought it was a great project. Not as good as Flower Boy to me, but it was an admirable effort. And I think it's going to be a pretty distinct record in his discography going forward. Now, of course, we do have to talk about the album cover on this show, and I really like Igor's album cover a lot. It's a bit collagey and constructivist, which I always appreciate. I like the pink. It's a really great choice, and not one that you would really expect from a hip-hop album, although this is not really a hip-hop album now, is it? It's a little bit trying to do its own thing. But I do like the contrast between his picture and how jagged the edges are compared to the very lighter pink color. And I like how they released the album in other colors too. You don't really see that on the digital version of the cover, but it's there and it's well put together, so good job on that. And that is my opinion on Igor. I really enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? I know a lot of people have been enjoying it, so what did you think? Let me know in the comments down below. But anyway, that is it for that review, and until the next one, farewell.